When I was a little boy, I lived in a little town, Talladega, Alabama. We lived in this neighborhood that even had a name. It was called Hillcrest. We lived in the last house down at the end of Cedar Street. There were 4 other boys just my age who lived in that neighborhood, and the whole neighborhood was like our playground. A lot of the houses didn't have, fences around the backyard. They might have hedges, but we knew where all the cut-throughs were, and we could just run and romp and play all over that neighborhood. And it didn't matter where we were always within earshot of one of our mamas, and we were always in eyesight of people who knew us. So we couldn't get into too much trouble. We could just have fun everywhere. And all of our parents operated by the same set of rules. We all had bedtimes. None of us could play with each other on Sunday afternoons. Our parents made it seem like it was just a big, safe, wonderful world. And when we got old enough to go to school, we could walk to school even in the first grade because our school was just 3 blocks up Cedar Street. We could all walk together, help each other across the roads. My parents knew everybody who lived in every house between our house and the school, and my mama knew all the teachers in our school by their first names. So being at school was just sort of like being at home. And I just sort of went through the first grade and the second grade and the third grade, the fourth grade, the fifth grade, the sixth grade, without ever running into very much trouble. No trouble that my friends and I couldn't get out of or go to a teacher for help. And I figured when I started the 7th grade, it would be the same way. After all, the junior high school was right across Cedar Street from the elementary school. I had been over there myself several times for some special assemblies they held in the auditorium to sort of get us used to it. So I figured when I went off to junior high, no big deal. 7th grade would be just like 6th grade. Now by this time, my family and I had moved to a farm outside of town, so I wasn't walking to school with my friends anymore. My mama drove me to school the first day of junior high. It was the Tuesday after Labor Day. I got out of the car and she drove off, and I turned around and I had a big surprise. The yard around the junior high was full of people I had never seen before. It never occurred to me that all the elementary schools in town came to that one junior high when they got to the 7th grade. I couldn't find any of my friends. I started wandering around through that big crowd of people looking for my friends, and I couldn't find any of them. But I did discover something about myself. I discovered how small I was. Oh, I knew I wasn't really big, but when you're playing with your friends, it doesn't much matter. Your friends don't go around telling you how small you are. But wandering around in that big crowd of strangers, I realized I'm about the smallest person here. And before I could find any of my friends, the bell rang. And we all went pouring into the door at the end of that building, and we poured down the hall, and we poured out into the auditorium at the far end of the building, and we all sat down. And the principal of the junior high greeted us and told us all the rules, and then dismissed us to go to homeroom. Now there's something else that was new. Homeroom. We didn't have homeroom in elementary school. We stayed in the same room all day. But I knew where my homeroom was because they had it all posted on sheets of paper on the door, and I had come by to find out where my homeroom was, so I knew my homeroom was down in the basement underneath the stage of the auditorium. The problem was every other homeroom in junior high was out the back of the auditorium, so almost everybody in the auditorium was coming out toward the back while I was trying to swim my way down through this crowd of big people to the stage. When I finally got down there to the stage and to the stairs that went down beside the stage, there were a few other people going downstairs at the same time, and they were whispering about our homeroom teacher, Coach Adams. Coach John Quincy Adams. That really was his name. I am not making this up. They were saying how mean he was. They were saying he had a big paddle that he kept in his desk, and he would use it on you if you ever made him mad. And they said, one of the things that makes him mad is to hear the name Elvis Presley. Now see, this was back in the 1950s when Elvis was just getting really big. I found out later that the reason Coach Adams did not like Elvis was people said he looked like Elvis. By the time I got to the bottom of those steps, I was good and scared. I didn't see any of my friends. I was the smallest person in the whole junior high, and my homeroom teacher was mean. I was looking around hoping maybe one of my friends was in that homeroom with me, but I couldn't find a single one of my friends there because, see, they don't put you in a homeroom by who your friends are. They put you in a homeroom by the alphabet. Rachel King was in homeroom with me, and I knew Rachel King, but she was a girl, and she didn't count yet. There was this guy sitting behind me in homeroom whose name was Jones, just like mine, but he was no relative of mine. He was not anybody I had ever seen before. He was huge. He didn't look like he'd come to junior high from elementary school at all. He looked like he might have come to junior high from the Navy. He was working on a mustache. I imagined tattoos under his t-shirt. Well, I did discover one thing right there the very first day in junior high. I discovered I could pass homeroom. Homeroom was not hard. All you had to do in homeroom was answer the roll when your name was called, and then be good for 10 minutes. I could do that. I was a professional good little boy. But that Jones sitting behind me, he couldn't do that. And the very first day of homeroom, he took his pencil and he stuck it in my back and he started twisting it like he thought I was some kind of pencil sharpener. And it hurt, and I didn't know what to do. And the next day he did the same thing, even harder. And the next day he did it even harder, and by Friday of the first week of junior high, I was trying to imagine what it was going to be like to die from lead poisoning. I didn't know what to do. I went home that weekend just miserable. And I did the only thing I knew to do. I went and told my parents. Well, my daddy, he said, that guy is a bully. And the way to take care of bullies is to stand up to them. He said, I'm going to teach you how to box. Now, you don't know my daddy, and my daddy didn't know that bully. He didn't know that I was the smallest person in the whole junior high, and he didn't know that this guy was huge. And my daddy was not somebody that looked like he could teach anybody how to box in one weekend. It would be like taking boxing lessons from Mr. Rogers. My mama said she had an idea. She said, let's go tell the principal. Well, I already knew I could get this guy in trouble. I just couldn't figure out how that was going to get me out of trouble. If I got him in trouble, it would just make him want to kill me quicker. So when I went back to school that next Monday, I was just as miserable as I could be. I went and sat in my desk, and when Coach Adams called the roll, I said, present when he called my name, and then I settled down being a good little boy, and before you know it, I felt that pencil go in my back again. And then I got an idea. Actually, I'm not sure you could call it an idea, because to qualify as an idea, you probably have to think about it. And if I'd thought about it, I probably would not have done it. I stood up with my back to Coach Adams, looking down at the Jones that was sitting behind me, and in my high, little, unchanged voice, I said, "Stop poking me in the back with that pencil." It got so quiet. You could hear the dust settling through the air in that room. I slid back down in my desk and I started looking at the surface of my desk, sort of studying the wood grain, studying where people had carved initials in that desk, studying that little pencil holder groove that they put at the top of those desks, just studying that desk, but I could feel Coach Adams walking down the aisle toward my desk. And he stopped right beside me. And he said, "Is everything all right here?" And I didn't say anything. I sort of waited to see what the Jones behind me might say. And he didn't say anything. I don't think he knew if everything was all right or not. So I looked up at Coach Adams and I said, "Yes, sir, I think so." And Coach Adams looked down at me, and he looked at that Jones behind me, and he looked back at me, and he said, "Good." And he turned around and he went back to his desk. And I started breathing again. And you know, I think it was that very same Monday morning that the intercom system clicked on, and the principal said, "Now, anybody that would like to run for student council, we're going to have elections on Friday. Stop by the office and pick up a form to fill out." Well, I had never thought of going into politics at all. But when I went home that night and we were talking about things at our dinner table, my two older sisters both said, "Oh, you should run for student council." We both did that, and we got elected, and it makes you feel like it's your school. It really helps you get to know people and get to know what's going on. You should do that. So, being a good little boy, the next day when I went to school, I stopped by the principal's office and picked up a form and filled it out, and I got the rules for running for student council. On Friday, we were going to have speeches. No speech could last more than 2 minutes, and after the speeches, everybody would vote. So I went home that day and told my mama I had to make a speech on Friday, and she said, "Let's write a poem." And still being a good little boy and wanting to do what my mama said, I said, "Okay," and we wrote a poem. And all the rest of that week, I went around trying to memorize my poem. It didn't matter what class I was in or what game I was playing or what I was doing. Inside my head, I was thinking about that poem, trying to remember my poem. And on that Friday, we all went into the auditorium. There was a row of chairs stretched all the way across the stage and a microphone up at the front of the stage, and we all sat down in our chairs. The principal stood up at the microphone and explained to the student body, "Now everybody listen to me. This is important. This is civics. This is good citizenship. We are not holding a popularity contest here. You pay close attention to these speeches. You give these candidates your respect and your undivided attention. And then afterwards we'll vote." And then he went and sat down. And way down at the other end of the line from where I was sitting, a little girl got up and she went to the microphone and she said, "My name is so-and-so, and I'm in so-and-so's homeroom. Please vote for me for student council." And she went and sat back down. And the next person got up and said, "My name is so-and-so, and I'm in so-and-so's homeroom. Please vote for me for student council." But do you think I really heard any of that? No, I was sitting there in my chair with my head looking down at my lap, trying to remember my poem. Pretty soon, the little boy sitting next to me got up and he went to the microphone and he said, "My name is so-and-so, and I'm in so-and-so's homeroom. Please vote for me for student council." And he came and sat back down. And it was my turn. And I got up and I went to the microphone and I said, If I were Jerry Lewis, I'd know just what to say. If I were Liberace, I'd sit right down and play. Tommy Sands would sing a song, Red Skelton would just kid along. Wyatt Earp would draw his gun and have those outlaws on the run. Elvis Presley would shake just a little, and young Jack Benny would play on his fiddle. But I'm not them, and they're not here. I'm just Bill Jones saying loud and clear, please vote for me for student council. And then there was all this noise. People shouted and laughed and clapped, and up till now there hadn't been a sound through the whole auditorium. And I turned red as a beet and turned around and sat back down in my chair and thought, what have I done? The next little girl sitting next to me, she got up and she went to the microphone and she said, my name is so-and-so, and I'm in so-and-so's homeroom. Please vote for me for student council. When it was all over, all these people I didn't even know came up and spoke to me. They said, thank you. Oh, it was so boring until yours. There was this one little boy from my homeroom. He was sort of standing over to the side waiting, and when everybody else had finished talking to me, he said, Coach Adams is gonna kill you. You said Elvis Presley in front of the whole school. That afternoon when we went back to homeroom at the end of the day, Coach Adams did not kill me. Coach Adams announced the winners of the student council election, and he said, we have a student council member in our homeroom. And he said my name. And when I got up to go home that Friday, I felt a tap on my shoulder, and it was the Jones who sat behind me. And he said, Jonesy, I voted for you. And that weekend when I went home, I thought, maybe I can survive junior high after all.